Steven, what do you have for us this week?
I want to talk more about DuckTales. That was an awesome show.
They just did a remastered version of the DuckTales video game that came out for the...
Does it still have the moon-based song?
Okay, guys, we're going to talk about Jesus now.
Is Jesus in DuckTales? No.
No.
You know who was? Gizmo Duck was in DuckTales.
Anyways, what do you have for us this week, Steven?
Yes. Welcome to the Steven Ducks Lounge. Come on in.
Oh, jeez.
Grab a cup of coffee. We're talking about DuckTales, but on a related note, excuse me. Have a seat first. Thank you. On a related note, there was an article in the Hollywood Reporter.
That noted news source of record.
Well, it was about how a little comic book company called DC, owned by Time Warner,
A very small indie
comics, which also owns the Sin Boldly podcast.
No,
not yet. We're not bought by CNN yet.
Still not bought by anybody.
Okay.
And nor will we be. Though if you want to donate, we can talk.
Okay.
Keep it moving, guys.
Anyway, has recently fired two writers from the two main writers from the comic book series Batwoman.
Everybody knows that's not a thing.
It is a thing.
That's not a thing.
It's a thing.
Women can't be superheroes.
Wonder Woman's a superhero.
No.
Storm.
No. That is against.
Whoever Scarlett Johansson plays in the Avengers movies.
Black Widow. Anyway, that's not the point, though. The point is, the reason they were fired is because one of the storylines has her getting married to a woman. Batwoman is, in the comic book canon, a lesbian.
And she's one of the few LGBTQ characters. Openly, anyways.
Yeah, I mean,
we all talk
about Robin and Aquaman. I mean, that's
and it's a bunch of very good-looking men running around in very tight clothing. So,
anywho,
there's some stereotypes there too.
So, the problem is they didn't want to show this because there's still some trepidation about showing weddings in that sense. And I wanted to bring this about a larger topic. What do you think is a good response to that when it's like, we don't want to show a lesbian couple have a wedding in mainstream media? Because DC Comics,
But this almost seems reactionary by DC, right? Like, how did someone had to, print the comic books. Mm-hmm. Like, did this go... I'm afraid I didn't read the story. Did this actually go out?
No.
So this was caught pre-release, and they were fired pre-release.
Yes.
So this wasn't like there was a public outcry, and they went, shoot, we gotta pull that.
So, last time I checked, the Supreme Court had overturned the Defense of Marriage Act.
Correct.
So, I'm just gonna put it out there that same-sex weddings are happening in real life.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the governor of Hawaii today just called a special session for Hawaii to consider a gay marriage proposal. Yes, they are happening.
The legislature of the state of Alabama is bringing forth a lawsuit against the state of Alabama.
So, I'm just a little confused on this. If this is something that is happening in real life, has been approved of from the highest levels of government.
Yes.
Why is this a problem?
So I'll take the opposite position on this. Just disclaimer, because the only way to fight this one is hard. Okay, there are plenty of things that are legal that we probably, and that have been approved by the highest courts, that we probably don't want showing up in comic books. Mm-hmm. Like abortions, right? You don't necessarily want... There may well have been a plotline, but that would be a controversial plotline and not necessarily something you would say belongs in comic books. Comic books have not been known for being a medium of driving social change. So what to you makes this aspect of our culture different?
Because it's about love.
There we go. Yes.
I mean, I don't see... I mean, the sort of really, really sarcastic, snarky side of me, which is admittedly a large chunk of my personality, is thinking, who's reading comic books these days? It's not little kids necessarily.
For the most part, probably not.
Who's reading comic books?
older white guys.
What do older white guys love?
Other older white guys? I don't see what's going on. Lesbians.
There you go. Okay, so that's. I'm glad I got that out of my system. So now I'm going to be serious. But there is something about showing love and commitment like that that I think is a value worth showing.
Yeah.
And I think particularly for kids that are reading it, kids have two moms, kids have two dads. Like this is reality. This is on the ground.
And this is all over like prime time network television.
Absolutely.
Which is the next point I want to get at.
Sure.
So, as we all know, we talked about it in the little sense with comic books and how that is let's be honest, it's still a niche market.
Well, we have a thing coming in the chat. One of our chatters worked at a bookstore. Hanging chats in the chat. Actually mentioned that he used to work in a bookstore, and a surprisingly large number of young children buy comic books, kind of in that 8 to 13 age group, which kind of has always been that prime market for comic books. So it is probably, actually reaching younger folks, not just the older, 30-something white guys who are all dressing really weird at Comic-Con.
Bert and Ernie reached out to me.
I also think that this is one of those instances, though, of there's a generation gap. So the people who are making major decisions about firing people over things like this, I'm telling you, for the most part, the kids don't think it's a big deal. I taught a sex education class to my United Methodist kiddos. And
oddly enough, I was there too.
Yes, you were, and as was Stephen.
Yes.
And one of the things we talked about how we were going to deal with the issue of homosexuality, given the United Methodist Church's tenuous
grasp on
yes, there, thank you, you said it, on this issue. How was I going to handle it? What had these kids heard? And one of the little girls, we were talking about it, and we were very careful in talking about it and very intentional, and one of the little girls said, "Why are we even talking about this? This isn't a big deal. That's other people's business. Why would I want to know that or care?" And so I think that little kiddos doing it, reading the comic books it's a case of adults freaking out about something that maybe isn't even on their radar as, quote, an issue.
And I guess to a certain, it's like I've always equated how racism seems to us. Right? Like, racism is still out there, and even in our generation. But it's just like, what? Like, who cares? Like, of course. Like, I had, growing up, an African-American family moved onto my block in this, like, all-white, monolithic suburb of Houston, Texas. And I thought it was, like, the least big deal in the world. Like, I was hanging out with Theo all the time, and, like, we were running around as kindergartners, cursing up a storm and just having the best time in the world. But, like, it just didn't seem like that big a deal. And yet, a generation ago, an African-American family moving into an all-white monolithic suburb, that would be huge. And there are still pockets in America where that's happening. And I'm not trying to ever make the argument that racism is over. But I think generationally, the weight of racism, the way racism is treated in our generation, is the way I hope that the generations coming up treats homophobia.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That it becomes less, not a thing, but just generationally less of a thing.
And doesn't impact how people interact with other human beings.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's it. And this homophobia is a learned behavior.
Yeah.
It's not just... Kids don't do that naturally. They learn that kind of behavior from somewhere, and I think by being so reactionary about it, that almost teaches children that it teaches homophobia.
Well, it's interesting, kind of my own story with, homophobia or the LGBTQ community is I knew what gay couples were long before I knew what homophobia was.
Right.
And so I just saw, this gay couple that's still very, dear to me. They both were at my wedding. And it's like, oh, of course, no, they just seem to really love each other. This just seems like a natural thing. It seemed very natural. They seemed very happy. They are very happy together. So I never really learned that homophobia piece. My mom sat us down, me and my brother Drew, like try to have the talk about they're a little different. Like, yeah, we know, Mom, it's not a big deal.
Well, to bring it back to the broader point that I want to touch on, at least for just a little bit,
Here's my...
how do we as a people of faith react to these media portrayals? Because superheroes are supposed to be tough and so they can't be, what we think of as not tough, or Christians are supposed to be this way. Let's look at Ned Flanders instead of yeah, and stuff like that. So how do we as a people of faith respond to basically stereotypes? Like, look at, I'm just going to say, I've never seen it, but they're running promos for a show called Modern Family. I'm sure everyone has seen it except me.
I haven't.
Where there is a gay couple.
Mm-hmm.
One is surprising as not... Well, one is what we would consider normal straight-laced guy, and the other one is completely campy and over the top. And you're walking... You think of, what's his name from Will and Grace?
Jack.
Just Jack. Yeah, think of that, just larger.
I love Just Jack.
I love when Sean Hayes came out, like it was... And
It was
like Nathan
it was
Lane
like
came
Nathan Lane coming out. You're like, or like Ricky Martin. You're like, yep.
Yes, you are. About time.
I really enjoy the Vida Loca.
But yeah, so how do we as a people of faith combat these things that are portrayed, like,
Well, it's so... Those cultural stereotypes are so messed up. So, like, I'm not a particularly, like, masculine guy, right? Like, I don't watch football or...
I do.
Right, but like, I identify as male, but I like, a lot of those male stereotypes of, like, running around and being really violent, or, like, running around and liking things that are really violent just never really connected with me. And so often, like, I got called gay as a child. Or as a preteen, and as a teenager. And, within my family, still to this day, occasionally.
I love that story about your grandfather.
Yeah, I'm a grown straight male who drives a Mini Cooper. Deal with it. And so these gendered constructions of, like, what is a gay man versus what is a real man is really troubling. Mm-hmm. Because I know gay men who are soldiers. Now, I'm obviously not going to name names for security reasons, but...
Well, you can now.
I actually can now, thank God.
Yes.
But I know, I'm not going to say it because it's their place to say, but I know gay men who are soldiers, and who are good soldiers. Mm-hmm. I know gay men who are football coaches. I also know gay men who are choir directors and, actors. But gay is not a gender, and gay is not a gender should not be a gender stereotype. You can be the most masculine male and still have, be sexually attracted to other men. Like, I'm always troubled by that.
Well, and the idea, I mean, this is just the way that I think about it, but, okay, not just me, but that gender performance is a spectrum, and it's actually independent of your sexuality.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of the discomfort that culture has with people who are not heterosexual is because that calls into question those gender relations. If two men are married, who's the submissive one?
Well,
like this is threatening and scary because of the way that we perform gender, and I think
that's got to be one of the reasons why they always make the gay character
super
squishy,
super campy,
and feminine,
and make lesbians super butch.
Yeah.
And less so. I think that there's
less so with lesbians because unfortunately lesbianism sells on television, right? Mm-hmm. Because you have that male 18 to 35 demographic that is all over that.
I think a lot of that, quite frankly, stems from gender, and that female sexuality is somehow below the radar of what's important.
Yeah. It's not challenging. It's interesting. I did in college. I did a project on cross-dressing. I did a project and it did involve me dressing up in a dress and high heels. That happened. And now that's on the internet. Wonderful. We did this project, and so we had
Google.
I was for a bulk of this project. I was the cameraman, And what we did is we had a very large man dressed in drag, and then we had a woman dress as a man. It was still very clearly being a woman, but dressing as a man. And you know what got the most troubled looks? It was the woman dressing as the man. The
college, you just assume you were a pledge.
Right. But there was when the man falling into a female stereotype was just kind of, oh, that's funny, or oh, that's weird. But the thing that made people look really uncomfortable and really challenged and kind of look away and start to move away was when the woman was dressed as the man.
I realize I'm like 3 years behind on this, but I watched Lady Gaga's performance at the VMAs in 2011. Have you seen this?
Haven't.
Does the performance in male drag as Joe Calderone, and does a monologue in which it is suggested that that is Lady Gaga's real identity.
Wow.
And it is, like, the look on Justin Bieber's face, because, like, the cameraman person pans to the audience, and Justin Bieber looks like his head is about to pop off, which is kind of awesome. But watching people who are artists react to that with a level of shock and almost fear is fascinating. I do highly recommend you look at it on YouTube. It's very, very, very interesting.